Okay, welcome to the Army Benefits Center Civilian Monthly Virtual Benefits Cafe live event, and thank you for joining us. I am sorry for the delay. I had to get a new CAC yesterday or 2 days ago, and having the certificates transferred over has really messed up the way my Teams is running, so I apologize for being 15 minutes late. But we are up and running now. It looks like we got a couple people still in here, so I do apologize. You have not missed anything. We are starting late at 11:17. 11:18. So my name is Wendy Modis. I am a workforce development specialist with the Army Benefits Center Civilian. This month we are going to discuss the death and service process for federal employees and the various survivor death benefits out there, as well as your beneficiary designations and those best practices when it comes to those. A copy of the slide deck will always be sent out to you after every presentation, along with a copy of a feedback survey. We do ask that you take the time to complete that short survey in order just to help us understand how we're doing, and also just to kind of provide any training topic suggestions you might like to see in the future. So today we're going to kind of merge two different virtual benefit cafe topics into one session. Excuse me, because both are equally important. So we will be discussing an overview of the death and service process, the first death benefit, how your survivor may be able to apply for a retirement annuity on your behalf and receive that benefit. And then there is also a children's death benefit as well. And then what happens when a death in service occurs. We'll also be covering the importance of the beneficiary designation process, the order of precedence that your benefit payouts will follow, various types of beneficiary forms that the federal government has, and then their completion, as well as who to forward them to once they are completed. So an employee death in service occurs when the employee is still on the agency's payroll. So you're still working along, and then it's an unexpected, untimely passing. Additionally, if an employee is eligible and has applied for immediate retirement and say they pass away prior to that retirement date, that is also considered a death in service as well. And that also applies to disability retirements as well. Should that death in service occur, benefits will be paid out to the various beneficiaries if those forms are on file, if those beneficiary forms have been completed and are on file. However, if no beneficiary forms exist, they don't have them on file, all benefits will be paid out in the order of precedence, which it's kind of a lengthy order of precedence. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit later on in the briefing. Beneficiary forms, they do become very important as they determine who you would like your benefits to go to. This also provides kind of a peace of mind for not only you, the employee, but also any of your grieving survivors should that, that unexpected passing occur. Also, many survivors are going to be covered under a federal health care benefit. A good thing to keep in mind is that any surviving spouse, they are only eligible to pick up that health insurance if a federal employee has left them a survivor annuity or a basic employee death benefit, which is paid to that spouse or the former spouse, which we're going to discuss that in detail on the next slide. If either of those are not being paid to your survivor, either that survivor annuity, such as the survivor retirement annuity or that basic employee death benefit, that survivor will have no right to continue that FEHB health insurance. And that can be a real shock in the event of an unexpected passing. So those are just things you kind of need to think about in advance and make sure that you're prepared. So the basic employee death benefit, it's also called, in the HR realm of things, it's called a BED-B. So when I say BED-B, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's the basic employee death benefit. It is an amount equal to 50% of the employee's final or average, if higher, their salary plus approximately, it's about $41,500 if the employee's passing occurred after December 1st, 2023. So they're going to add that on to it. So the benefit can be paid to the surviving current spouse. It can also be paid to a former spouse or dependent if that is based upon a court order. So whomever receives the BEDB benefit must elect to either receive 36 monthly installments of the money or the money in a one-time payment. Due to a constant cost of living adjustment each year, that information, the amount of that 41.5, that approximate amount of 41.5, that does generally change. And if you would like to know that amount, that can be found in the annual changes benefits administration letter on opm.gov. So you can just go to opm.gov and use the search tool, search benefits administration letter, and look for the annual changes BAL out there. So as with any benefit, an employee must meet certain criteria, eligibility criteria for the benefit to be paid. If an employee completed at least 18 months of creditable civilian service and the employee's passing occurs while he or she is covered under FERS and paying into the FERS retirement system, only then can that BEDB be considered. So only then can it be paid out. So remember, the employee has to have at least 18 months of creditable civilian service, and they have to be paying into the FERS retirement system. So covered under FERS and paying into their FERS retirement system. As with the employee, the surviving spouse must also meet eligibility criteria. That BEDB can be paid to a current spouse if they were married to the employee for at least 9 months at the time of the death. If less than 9 months of marriage exists, but a child was born of the marriage or the death is accidental, it's deemed accidental, and no court order exists to pay benefits to a former spouse, then the employee's current spouse can receive that BEDB. Excuse me. The BEDB is payable to a former spouse if specified under a court order and that federal employee has completed the 18 months of creditable civilian service. Again, that marriage must have lasted at least 9 months, and that former spouse cannot remarry prior to age 55 or they are not eligible for that BEDB. So survivor annuities, again, this is very similar to what you would receive at retirement, what your spouse would, what you as an employee would leave your spouse at retirement. Very similar to that. So in the event of a death in service, a survivor annuity can be paid monthly to your current spouse if the employee had at least 10 years of creditable service, of which at least 18 months must be civilian service under FERS. A surviving spouse may be eligible for that retirement annuity if the employee had at least 18 months of creditable civilian service under CSRS and passed while subject to either CSRS or FERS coverage. Additionally, you and your current spouse must be married at least 9 months or have a child born of the marriage, or the death must be accidental with no court order awarding a former spouse a survivor benefit. So it kind of follows the same eligibility lines for every single benefit that is out there. So for the former spouse, just like the BEDB, the former spouse can be eligible for a survivor annuity if eligibility criteria are met. And those criteria, again, are very similar to that BEDB. Again, we're talking about the survivor annuity, similar to the retirement survivor annuity. The award must be specified in a qualifying court order and approved by OPM, but it has to be approved prior to the employee's passing. So it has to be in that divorce court order. The employee must have completed at least 10 years of creditable service, 18 months of which were civilian service under either CSRS or FERS. And then additionally, again, that marriage must have lasted at least 9 months, and that former spouse cannot remarry before age 55 unless that marriage to the deceased lasted at least 30 years. So if they were married to the decedent for at least 30 years and they remarry before age 55, then they can become eligible for that survivor annuity. A former spouse may lose the survivor annuity if, of course, they die or remarry before age 55, unless that marriage to the deceased lasted at least 30 years. But if a former spouse loses the survivor annuity, it can be reinstated if the former spouse divorces their current spouse. So if they do remarry before age 55 and then they divorce that current spouse, they can go ahead and have that survivor annuity reinstated. So there are two different calculations for a survivor annuity based upon the retirement system under which the deceased employee was covered. So for CSRS, a spouse's annuity will be 55% of the higher of either the deceased employee's high 3 average salary and length of service, or a guaranteed minimum, which is the lesser of 40% of the deceased employee's high 3 average salary, or a regular annuity after increasing the employee's length of service by the period of service that occurred between the date of death and the date the employee would turn 60 years of age. Gotta love math. Always have to have that math in there with the HR. So basically they're just tacking on the amount of time or that period of service that occurs between the date of death and the date the employee would have been 60 years of age. So it's whatever the lesser is of the 40% of the deceased employee's high 3 average salary or that regular annuity by tacking that period of service on. So they're going to look at that, and that's for CSRS. For FERS, it's a little different. The survivor benefit for current or former spouse is computed as if the employee retired voluntarily on the date of death. A surviving or former spouse would receive 50% of the annuity the employee would have earned at the time of death. No age reduction penalty occurs if the employee does not meet their minimum retirement age. So it's pretty cut and dry for those FERS folks. The next one is the children's death benefit, and this is very similar to the survivor benefit. A child of the marriage may also qualify for that death benefit paid in addition to the spousal survivor annuity. If the deceased employee was employed for at least 18 months of creditable civilian service, and then that child is unmarried and under age 18, they are either that or age 18 to 22 and a full-time student at an accredited university, or age 18 and was certified and capable of self-support prior to age 18, then the benefit is automatically payable based on the death of the employee, even if an annuity is not reduced. An eligible child's death benefit is based upon a specific dollar amount established by the annual cost of living adjustment. And it is based on a single or double orphan rate. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with the orphan rate, we're going to kind of cover that a little bit. The single orphan rate, how they determine that, that's when a child who has one living parent who was married to the employee or annuitant, either at death or any time prior, then they consider that single orphan rate. That benefit is the lesser of $635 per month per child, or $1,905 per month divided amongst a number of eligible children if the amount of eligible children is over 3. So they divide that amongst them. And then you have the double orphan rate, which is when the surviving child has no living parent married to the employee or annuitant. The benefit for that double orphan rate is the lesser of $763 per month per child, or $2,289 per month divided among the number of eligible children. Again, that's the number of eligible children over 3, so 3 eligible children. So I've included a link to Chapter 73 of the CSRS FERS handbook that covers the children's benefit. It doesn't have much more than this in it, but it kind of spells it out a little bit more. So if you have questions on that, you can kind of reference Chapter 73. Also, if a child is receiving Social Security payments due to the parent's death, The children's death benefit through the federal government will be reduced by 100% if the deceased employee was covered under FERS. They will take that death benefit and they kind of basically offset it with the Social Security. So you'll generally, that Social Security payment is pretty generous, so they will offset that. So the next one is in the event of a deceased employee, if they have no surviving spouse or child, a lump sum benefit of retirement contributions plus interest, it can be paid to the most recent beneficiary designation on file. Or if no beneficiary has been designated, then that lump sum payment will follow the order of precedence that is listed here. And we kind of talked about the order of precedence earlier. So this is what OPM follows if no designation of beneficiary is on file. So we have the court order, which will always precede everything because it is a legal and binding document. Then we have the designated beneficiary, which is what you decide, where you decide you want your money to go. Then you have the widower, which is generally a spouse, obviously. And then you have a child or children in equal shares, parent or parents in equal shares, the executor or administrator of the estate, and next of kin is determined by state law where the employee last resided. And as you can see, it kind of probably gets further and further away from who you probably want that those benefits to go to in the event of your passing. So it's a good thing to know that you do have an option out there that you can designate your beneficiaries. It takes little time and little time to review as well to make sure that they're up to date. But we'll talk a little bit about the best practices here in just a minute. So what do you do if a death in service occurs? Nobody really wants to discuss that with their loved one, but I will tell you it is a really important piece of the puzzle that your loved ones will need to handle in the event of your passing while a federal employee. Discussing this process with a loved one or even merely providing them this information can generate kind of a sense of peace knowing you've at least given them the information prior to your passing. Or if it's, even if it's just in a safe deposit box with those beneficiary forms or, in a safe in your home, it's good information for your family to know. It's that much less they've got to try and work through in case it does happen. And I've had to do this, and it is very frustrating, especially in the federal government, because there's just so many different things you have to work through. So what does your family need to know? All they have to do is to contact your supervisor or your agency HR representative just to let them know that you have passed away. Or that their employee has passed away. The information they will need to provide is your full legal name, their relationship to you, dates of birth and death, and a working mailing address and phone for them, for their survivor, for your survivor. Once the agency has been notified, once your agency has been notified, they will notify the Army Benefits Center civilian through a platform called BATS-R or via the inquiry email box in our Contact Us tab that is set up for the HR service centers to notify us. And then once the Army Benefits Center receives the notification of death, it is immediately assigned to a benefits specialist who has 24 hours from the date of the Army Benefits Center's notification or next business day to contact the survivor directly and explain that entire process. Benefits specialists are not legally allowed to review any beneficiary information with the survivor, as that is against the Office of Federal Employee Group Life Insurance Policy. All we can do as benefit specialists is gently assist them through the death and service benefits process. So that is not a part of the process that we can help with. So they will have to go through the Office of Federal Employee Group Life Insurance for that. So survivor benefit packets are then going to be sent to all known survivors within 5 days of the death notification. It must be completed by each known survivor and then returned to the Army Benefit Center civilian. The assigned benefits specialist will review and complete the survivor packet or packets and then send the final copies to OPM, Defense Finance and Accounting Service, in the Office of Federal Employee Group Life Insurance. The Army Benefit Center will type up a final letter packet. We'll create that and send that to all survivors. And that will explain the contact information for survivor claims assistance, and it will indicate which claims will apply to that particular survivor. So they will go out to the different survivors and we'll let them know what claims apply to them. So now we're kind of switch up the topic discussion a little, and I'm going to start with a little story, which is true and is indicative of some of the issues that we have seen in the past. Mr. Warren Hillman, he was a retired federal employee. He had been married 3 different times, and during his second marriage, he did sign up for life insurance with the federal government and listed his then wife, Judy, as a beneficiary of his policy. Then some years later, he divorced and remarried again. When he passed away unexpectedly, Mr. Hillman was 66 years of age, and he left behind an insurance policy valued at about $125,000 roughly. Unfortunately for his widow, Jacqueline, he neglected to update his beneficiary designations. His ex-wife, Judy, she filed for and received those benefits, and despite being divorced from Mr. Hillman for 10 years, she received them. So the beneficiary battle, who wins? Normally, the state may elect to step in and help, as many state statutes effectively revoke the old beneficiary designation that instructs the benefit go to a former spouse. However, you should never rely on that, especially as a federal employee. In Mr. Hillman's case, his widow, Jacqueline, she used this argument in a state court to try and recover the benefits. But this went all the way to the United States Supreme Court because Mr. Hillman was a federal employee. In the end, the court sided with Mr. Hillman's former spouse, Judy, and she was able to keep those benefits. So the moral of this story, or this example, is that we often complete those beneficiary designations at the beginning of our career because they tell us to do it, and we don't give it much thought afterwards. However, these forms deserve careful attention, and they really deserve it often, or at least, over time. So why are they important? If completed correctly, these documents are legal and binding. They take precedence over what is in other estate planning documents, such as a will or trust. For example, an employee may indicate in their will they want everything to go to their spouse in the event of their passing. However, if the beneficiary designation on their federal life insurance policy states it still names an ex-spouse because the employee failed to update that beneficiary form, the ex-spouse can receive those proceeds of that policy, just like in Mr. Hillman's case. Secondly, designating a beneficiary on federal benefits can simplify the way the proceeds from that particular item or benefit are transferred to an employee's loved ones, and that makes it move along faster in the event of an unexpected passing. For example, if a beneficiary is not named, the proceeds can be stuck in probate court. That can result in unnecessary delays, some additional costs, and even unfavorable income tax treatment. Naming a beneficiary does provide sort of a default for the account or policy. Again, this drives home the importance of why you need to review and update those forms regularly. Just taking the time to designate a beneficiary can also provide that sense of peace for you, the employee, knowing they have planned accordingly for your family in the event of your passing, and it ensures your money is going to the place you choose in the event of your passing. Basically, the owner of the policy gets to make that decision on how that money is distributed or how that benefit is distributed, rather than relying on the generic order of precedence. We'll kind of cover this a little bit more here. What is the order of precedence? When a person passes away without leaving a will, that person's property falls into what's called an estate, and the laws of the state the deceased resided in at the time of the death govern the distribution of the estate. This is where that order of precedence comes in. For an employee's federal group life insurance and any additional federal benefits, the order of precedence is listed to the right on the slide here. In the end, it is the employee's choice to decide whether they want to determine the distribution of their property or they want the state to do so. It is important to note an employee cannot use the designation of beneficiary form to supersede a court order, so there's not going to be any way that you can get out your ex-spouse, Debbie Sue. You can't get around having her, having to pay her so much of your retirement or this or that. So, it's always court orders will always, in most cases, preclude that beneficiary designation. So just know that that will always supersede. So basically, the beneficiary form, it just kind of gives you that freedom to choose who you want it to go to. So there are several designation of beneficiary forms that any federal employee should complete. I hear a lot of people say, well, is it really necessary to complete all 4? So we're going to kind of go over all 4 of them and the reasons why that you should complete them. So the standard form 1152, this is for any unpaid compensation of the deceased federal employee. This would pertain to any amount of pay that's still on the books with DFAS, such as a lump, sorry, that's my dog's barking, such as a lump sum annual leave payment or a partial paycheck that maybe you pass in the middle of a pay period. They still have to pay that out to someone. So they're going to pay that lump sum annual leave payment as well as that partial paycheck. That will be paid to whomever is listed on that 1152. And that can be a lot of money. A lump sum annual leave payment can amount to a lot. Next is the standard form 3102, and that is for CSRS and FERS retirement contributions that were added to the decedent's account during active federal service. So anything you were paying into CSRS and FERS retirement. If the deceased is not eligible for retirement, the designated beneficiary may request those retirement contributions the decedent paid into their retirement system each pay period be refunded. So you can request the refund of all of those retirement contributions. And that can add up to a lot if that career has spanned over many years. So that is where that SF 3102 comes in, and that is why that one is very important. The standard form 2823, that is probably the most notable as it pertains to the Federal Employees Group Life Insurance Program, or FEGLI. The designated beneficiary on this form will receive all proceeds for which the decedent was eligible according to the employee's election. This one is very important, and we do see situations such as Mr. Hillman's scenario from time to time, but most of those are dealt with at the OFEGLI level. I mean, we can see that it's going to happen at our level, but the Office of Federal Employee Group Life Insurance, they generally take care of those cases at that level. And then lastly, the Thrift Savings Plan, they have their own beneficiary form for the Thrift Savings Plan account and those contributions. These are completed electronically by logging into your account at tsp.gov. TSP contributions can also add up to a lot over time if the decedent has been contributing to TSP during a lengthy career. So that's something you definitely want to assign a beneficiary to as well. So when an employee completes the beneficiary forms, there are a few guidelines that OPM adheres to. First, the forms must all be completed in their entirety and either signed in ink or use of a CAC certificate signature. We prefer the CAC certificate because it's more of a sure thing. I think that, they can photocopy that, so that's not a problem. But if you still want to sign that wedding signature, just make sure you're sending that original form for certification. Please ensure the employee is using the most recent form update, as this can also void any beneficiary forms. You want to make sure you're using the most recent update. Those current form copies can be found on the Army Benefits Center website, or you can also go to opm.gov. You can type in the search bar standard form 2823 or SF 2823, and that form will come up on opm.gov. No corrections of any kind are permitted on any of these forms. Sorry about that. If an employee makes an error, they must resubmit a clean form. There can be no strike-throughs, cross-outs, and initialed information, or the use of any type of correction fluid or tape. 2 witnesses who are not named as beneficiaries must witness the employee's signature on the form. Their signatures must be in ink or via CAC certificate to be valid. If you can use that CAC certificate, that allows a fully electronic form to be completed. So if you are wanting a couple of people in the office to witness your signature, make sure those witnesses are looking at your signature to make sure you are who you are, and you're checking the CAC to make sure that that CAC signature belongs to you. But they can also do that, but they need to email that back to you, and then you need to email it to the second witness. The witness doesn't email it to the witness. They need to email it back to you. You need to email it to the second witness. So you can do that. That does allow for a fully electronic form, and then you can email that to the Army Benefits Center if needed. Trust designations, if you have those, they must be attached to and made a part of the beneficiary form. This information should include the name of the grant, the trust name if it's different, name or names of the trustees, and then the date the trust was signed. Each beneficiary form has examples of how to correctly write an employee's designation of beneficiary for multiple situations. If there are questions, you can refer your questions to these guidelines on the instruction portion of the form when completing each form. Just like many things with the federal government employment, employees are always encouraged to keep a copy for your records. We do highly recommend those copies be placed in a safe or safe deposit box to ensure that your representative has access to those documents, unless, of course, it's supposed to be a surprise at the time of your passing, which does happen from time to time. In the end, at least one person should know where to locate those important documents. Along with those documents, we do also recommend keeping the name of the employee's agency and supervisor contact information, or at least the number to the Army Benefits Center phone center, so it is all in one place should that employee suddenly pass away. So you have that information for your loved ones. They're not trying to search and figure out where they need to call and how they need to get that death reported. Beneficiary forms do ask the employee on the form to list the agency or department information. We do receive a lot of questions about this particular question, but it is just the agency where the employee is currently employed. Many people miss this and they just fail to complete it. It is important to have that completed, and there's a reason for it. Sometimes there are multiple names with the same name and middle initial, and they work in different places. So the various employee names can be disseminated, or you can kind of look through them and know that this person worked in this place, so it's got to be this one. So that can be helpful in those situations where they're searching for the right employee. So just make sure you're putting your agency or department information on there. All forms do have certain places they need to be taken for certification. Times have changed a little bit because the CPACs have moved. We've kind of moved to HR service centers, so they've kind of decreased the ability to get in contact with those places, and we've changed the way we do things for our employees, so that assistance piece is a little bit harder for the customer. However, if you have an agency HR representative or a local HR service center place you can go, You can use that as a one-stop shop for your signature witness or your witnesses, your certification, and they can also upload that to your EOPF and provide you a copy. That is the preferred method for those certificates. So if you have an agency HR representative, it is preferred that you go to them to get all of that done there. However, you can also mail those or email those to the Army Benefits Center. We put the address there on the slide. You can use our contact us information, those inquiry boxes. You can use those to email those forms to us as well if you're using the completely electronic method by the CAC signatures. That being said, again, if I have HR representatives in the audience that are face-to-face with the employees and they're requesting witnesses, the employees requesting witnesses and certification of the forms, it is okay to go ahead and do so. We just want to make sure that that completed form gets into the employee's EOPF and that a copy is provided. So employees, make sure you request that when you are talking to your HR representatives. There are 3 agencies involved in the management of any FEGLI benefit an employee may have, so it's really important to have things in order at any point in your career. OPM, it is responsible for the overall administration of the FEGLI program to include the determination of your coverage eligibility and authorizing receipt and deposit of payment to beneficiaries and survivors in the event of an employee's passing. They also set the open season enrollment period dates, and we all know that those are very few and far between. They do not run concurrent with the health benefit open season. I think the last one was like 2016, 2017. So just know those are few and far between. The Office of Federal Employee Group Life Insurance, or OFEGLI, they process claim payments and they help to determine any living benefit eligibility. And a living benefit is generally applied for and approved if the employee is terminally ill and his or her doctor states the employee's passing is imminent within 9 months. Living benefits can be paid out through a third-party company in advance of the employee's passing, and that third-party company then becomes the beneficiary on the policy. OFEGLI also determines benefit eligibility in the case of an accidental death or dismemberment cases. Lastly, the Army Benefits Center, we are responsible for insurance assistance, counseling, and information during your federal employment, and we are responsible for the processing of those initial death claims packets. Important reminders, just a few tips before we close. A federal employee with benefits should always ensure that they're prepared for the unexpected. To assist in that preparation, it's really important we encourage employees we service to schedule beneficiary form updates often. There are so many ways that can nullify a form, such as moving agencies, name changes, marriage, divorce, birth of a child, even, just to name a few. So anytime a change occurs, please just redo the form if it's needed. Just look at the form, review it. If something has changed on it, redo the form and have it certified and uploaded. While it is highly encouraged an employee recomplete a beneficiary designation for every life-changing event, we also recommend that employees just simply schedule a time each year to review and or recomplete the forms. It may seem like overkill, but it gives that peace of mind that your affairs are in order at all times. I always do mine like right around open season. I just kind of take a look at them, make sure my addresses are okay, the names and everything's okay on there. It's still going to who I want it to go to. Nothing has changed. If that's the case, then I don't change it. If it has changed, then I do change it. So just give it that time and review. Just know that that's a good time to do things because open season, you're supposed to be looking at your FEHB anyway. So why not take a look at your FEGLI and those beneficiary forms as well. Ask we're asked that you send your copies for certification to the Army Benefits Center, or you can also seek out an HR representative if you have one in the agency. You can always act as that one-stop shop to provide the 2 witnesses to the employee's signature. The HR representative can. They can certify your form, they can upload it to EOPF, as well as provide you the original form or give you a copy. If there are any errors on your form, please recomplete the form before you turn it in, because we will not be able to accept it, and OFAGLY and OPM will not accept corrections of any kind as well. Lastly, I think we can all agree, again, death is generally not on anyone's top 10 list of things to discuss. However, one thing I will suggest is you remind the employee, or remind yourself to notify your designated beneficiaries and let them know where they can find this paperwork and the points of contact list. I really believe it's a good conversation to have with your spouse or loved ones, because heavy grief over a loved one's loss is really hard. It's difficult enough to maneuver, and keeping one's affairs in order in this manner is just one less thing loved ones will have to stress about during that time. Also, keeping contact information to OPM, the Office of Federal Employee Group Life Insurance, and the Army Benefits Center handy with your beneficiary forms, as well as just a quick explanation of what to do when that time occurs, can be helpful. You can leave that slide, just a copy of that slide if you want to. That would help them, or a copy of the slide deck. You never know, that might help them out. All right, so I have no questions right now, because I don't believe, I know somebody said, has the event started? My screen is still blank. I know I probably lost more than half of my audience because of the lack of time, or the late start date, so I do apologize with that. I'm going to have to see what I need to do. But this does conclude our session today. We do hope that you were able to take away some helpful information to better assist you. I do want to go ahead. Here's our contact information. We would be happy to assist you with any questions or concerns at any time. You can also email me directly. My name is Wendy Mottas, Mottas. I can put that in here. I'm in Global, and I'm the only Mottas in Global, but I'll go ahead and put it in the chat. Just a reminder, again, I'll be sending out the slide deck and that feedback survey, along with a playlist link to access all the employee virtual benefits cafe sessions on YouTube. I use that Teams attendee report that were sent. So I do want to thank you for joining us, and I will also post onto Facebook next month's virtual benefits cafe information. I will also try and put something in your email. I do hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and a great weekend. I will stick around for just a little bit in case somebody has any questions, and we'll go from there. But again, hope you have a great weekend. Take care.